Ever wondered about the hidden stories of our past? Let's dive into some mind-blowing historical facts that will leave you amazed. From ancient civilizations to modern technology, history is full of surprises. Today, we're uncovering some of the most intriguing ones that will make you question everything you thought you knew. Get ready to have your mind blown. Okay, let's talk about Cleopatra for a second. You know, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, famous for her intelligence and dramatic life story. We often picture her in this ancient world, surrounded by pyramids and hieroglyphics. But here's the thing. Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone than the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid was completed around 2560 BC. Cleopatra lived from 69 to 30 BC. And the first iPhone, that was released in 2007. Cleopatra was only separated from the modern age by a little over 1900 years, while the Great Pyramid was built almost 4,500 years before her time. It makes you wonder what other historical figures might be closer to our time than we think. All right, let's talk Vikings. These fierce warriors from Scandinavia, known for their raids and explorations. And what's the first thing that pops into your head when you think of Vikings? If you're like most people, it's probably those iconic horned helmets, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but that image? Totally inaccurate. There's no archaeological evidence to support the idea that Vikings ever wore helmets with horns. The only Viking helmet ever discovered is a simple, hornless design. The horned helmet myth seems to be a much later invention, possibly popularized by 19th century romantic artists and operas. Vikings were practical people, especially when it came to their clothing and armor. They likely wore simpler helmets made of leather or metal, if they wore helmets at all. So while the horned helmets might make for a cool image, it's time to retire that stereotype. Let's jump forward in time now to the world of computers. Specifically, let's talk about the word bug. You know, those pesky little errors in software that can cause all sorts of problems. But have you ever wondered where that term actually came from? Well, it has a surprisingly literal origin story. We have to go back to 1947 to Harvard University, where a team of engineers was working on the Harvard Mark II computer. This massive machine used relays, which are electromagnetic switches, to process data. One day, the computer started malfunctioning, giving incorrect results. The engineers went looking for the source of the problem and eventually found it, a moth. It had gotten stuck in one of the relays, causing it to malfunction. The engineers carefully removed the moth and taped it into the computer's logbook with the note, "First actual case of bug being found." And thus, the term bug was born to describe a software or hardware error. Chapter 4, Radioactive Royalty, Marie Curie, a name synonymous with scientific brilliance and groundbreaking discoveries. She was a pioneer in the study of radioactivity, and her work led to major advances in medicine and our understanding of the atom. But her legacy is literally still radioactive today. We're talking about her notebooks. Even after all these years, Marie Curie's notebooks are still radioactive. Curie worked extensively with radioactive materials like radium and polonium, and her notebooks, lab equipment, even her furniture, absorbed radiation over time. Her notebooks are stored in lead-lined boxes in France's Bibliothèque Nationale. Anyone who wants to examine them has to sign a waiver and wear protective gear to minimize their exposure to radiation. Chapter 5, Henry VIII's Harem. Let's talk about Henry VIII, the King of England, from 1509 until his death. You know, the one who had 6 wives. He's famous for his tumultuous love life and his penchant for, well, getting rid of his wives. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. But here's the thing, while it's true that Henry VIII had some of his wives executed, the idea that they all met a tragic end is a bit of a historical exaggeration. Yes, 2 of his wives, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, were indeed beheaded for treason and adultery, respectively. But the other 4 wives? Catherine of Aragon died of natural causes. Anne of Cleves lived out her days in England and had a good relationship with Henry after their divorce. Catherine Parr outlived Henry and even remarried after his death. Chapter 6. The Blinking Wars. They're often long, drawn-out affairs, lasting years, even decades. But there's one war that stands out for its sheer brevity. The Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. This conflict, fought between Great Britain and the Zanzibar Sultanate, lasted a grand total of, wait for it, 38 minutes. Yes, you heard that right, 38 minutes. It all started when the pro-British Sultan Hamad bin Thawani died and his cousin Khalid bin Bargash seized power. The British gave Khalid an ultimatum to step down, but he refused. And on August 27, 1896, at precisely 9 a.m. local time, the British warships opened fire on the Sultan's palace. The bombardment lasted just 38 minutes before Khalid's forces were overwhelmed, and he fled to the German consulate. Okay, so we've talked about the shortest war in history, but what about the longest? Buckle up, because this one's a doozy. The longest war in recorded history lasted a mind-boggling 335 years. That's longer than the United States has even existed. It's called the Anglo-Dutch Wars, a series of conflicts fought between England and the Dutch Republic. The Anglo-Dutch Wars weren't one continuous war, but rather 4 major wars interspersed with periods of relative peace. These wars were mainly fought over control of trade routes and colonies, as both England and the Dutch Republic were major naval powers at the time. The first shots were fired in 1652, and the conflict officially ended in 1988 with a peace treaty signed retroactively. It wasn't until centuries later that someone realized the oversight, and they finally got around to formally declaring peace. The Anglo-Dutch Wars are a reminder that history can be messy, complicated, and sometimes just plain strange. Chapter 8, A Pirate's Ransom. Let's journey back in time to the Roman Republic and talk about one of history's most famous figures. Julius Caesar, brilliant general, cunning politician, writer, and victim of piracy. Yep, you heard that right. Even the mighty Caesar wasn't immune to the perils of piracy. It happened in 75 BC when a young Caesar, just 25 years old at the time, was sailing across the Aegean Sea. He was captured by Cilician pirates, a notorious group of seafaring bandits who terrorized the Mediterranean. According to the Roman historian Plutarch, Caesar was surprisingly chill about the whole ordeal. The pirates demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver for Caesar's release. He scoffed at this, declaring that he was worth at least 50 talents. Eventually, the ransom was paid, Caesar was released, and he immediately gathered a fleet of ships, hunted down the pirates, and had them crucified. Chapter 9. Ancient Olympics. Let's talk about the Olympics, those iconic games that bring the world together every 2 years for a celebration of athleticism, sportsmanship, and national pride. But the Olympics have a long and fascinating history, dating back centuries to ancient Greece. The first Olympic Games were held in Olympia, Greece, way back in 776 BC. These ancient games were a far cry from the massive multi-sport events we know today. They were originally a one-day religious festival honoring Zeus, the king of the gods in Greek mythology. The main event of these early games was the Stadion, a foot race of about 192 meters. Over time, other events were added, including wrestling, boxing, chariot racing, and the pentathlon. The ancient Olympics were a major event in the Greek world, and athletes from all over Greece would come to compete. The games were held every 4 years, and during that time, a sacred truce was declared throughout Greece, allowing athletes and spectators to travel safely to Olympia. Chapter 10. A Wall Secret. The Great Wall of China, a monumental feat of engineering, a symbol of Chinese history and culture, and not visible from space with the naked eye. That's right, despite what you might have heard, the Great Wall of China is not actually visible from space without some serious visual aid. The idea that the Great Wall is the only human-made structure visible from space is a popular one, but it's simply not true. While the Great Wall is incredibly long, stretching over 13,000 miles, it's relatively narrow, averaging only about 20 feet wide in most places. Astronauts have confirmed that while they can see cities, roads, and other large-scale human structures from space, the Great Wall is much harder to spot. So while the Great Wall might not be visible from space without a little help, it's still an awe-inspiring feat of engineering and a testament to human ingenuity. Outro, the wrap-up. From ancient Egypt to modern technology, history is filled with unexpected twists and turns. These fascinating facts are just a glimpse into the rich tapestry of our past. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to discover, and more to question about the world around us. What other historical facts surprise you? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let's continue the conversation. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more mind-blowing content.